8 women, 2 states, 13 years, 0 national alerts, no task force, no composite sketch on the evening news, no press conference, no America's Most Wanted segment, nothing. Just a man in a pickup truck driving through the oldest city in the United States, while tourists photograph Spanish colonial architecture 30 minutes away. The police didn't find him through detective work. They found him because a retired deputy slipped a newspaper clipping inside a Christmas card. And when investigators from 4 states finally sat across from William Darrell Lindsey in an interrogation room in Asheville, North Carolina, in January 1997, he didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't go silent. He leaned forward, looked every detective in the eye, and said, "You have to understand something. There is Good Bill, and there is Bad Bill. Good Bill is a decent man. Bad Bill is someone society should be afraid of." Then he confessed to 8 murders, including one nobody had asked him about. One of those women kissed the last person who saw her alive on the cheek and wished him a Merry Christmas, before walking through a trailer door and never coming back out. This is that story. All of it. William Darrell Lindsey was born on May 18, 1935, in Palatka, Florida, a small town on the St. Johns River, 50 miles south of Jacksonville. He was 5 months old when both of his biological parents died in a car accident. His biological father had been a roofer. His mother left nothing in the record except her absence. A couple named Lindsey, who had recently buried their own infant, adopted him. He became the youngest of 4 children in that household: 2 sisters, a brother, and him, a replacement child in a grieving home. His adoptive father drifted between jobs throughout William's childhood: local actor, appliance salesman, laundry truck driver, peripheral, largely absent from the emotional life of the family. The adoptive mother was a nurse at the local hospital by profession, trained to reduce suffering, and she came home and distributed it freely. She was intensely religious and physically brutal. She beat the children with cast-iron skillets, leather straps, and her bare hands. She pinched. She pulled hair. She called it Christian discipline. She framed every act of violence as an act of God. William struggled in school from the beginning. Teachers flagged him as severely below grade level. He repeated years. He tested with what appeared to be a significantly below average IQ. He had no close friends. He was beaten by classmates regularly and without consequence. What developed in that silence was a behavioral pattern that would appear in every criminology textbook as a precursor to predatory violence. He began torturing small animals, and he began setting fires. Neighbor children's playhouses, brush piles, anything that burned and couldn't fight back. These were not pranks. They were practice. In 1956, when William Darrell Lindsey turned 21, his adoptive mother sat him down and told him the truth about his origins for the first time. His biological parents had died when he was an infant. He had been taken in as a newborn. He was not, by blood, a Lindsey. And then she handed him a bill, an actual demand for repayment. For every year she claimed to have housed and fed him. The woman who had beaten him with a skillet throughout his entire childhood now wanted financial compensation for the privilege of doing so. He enlisted in the National Guard. He worked as a mechanic, one of the few things he could do competently. In 1958, he married a woman named Villa Jean. They had 5 children together. He cycled through jobs: Hudson Pulp and Paper Corporation, a steel plant in Tennessee, Ace Equipment Company. He was fired from every position, always for theft, poor performance, or both. Behind the surface of a working-class family man, the reality was consistent and ugly. Sustained alcohol abuse, a period of heroin use by his own admission, and ongoing physical and emotional violence against his wife. In 1974, two events occurred that should have permanently altered what followed. He was arrested for aggravated assault, and he wrote a 7-page suicide letter, was admitted to a psychiatric facility, and received a formal clinical diagnosis: sociopath. He was discharged from that facility. Within days of discharge, he drove his 5 children in a car and crashed it deliberately. 3 children were hospitalized. No serious criminal charge followed that removed him from those children's lives. The following year, he convinced a family court judge that Jean was the mentally unstable party in the marriage. He was awarded full custody of all 5 children. In August 1975, he married Annie Laurie Langley. She had 2 sons, whom he adopted. Her sister moved into the household and witnessed the ongoing emotional and physical abuse from inside that home. The record does not reflect that anyone with authority ever asked her what she saw. Annie Laurie Lindsey was diagnosed with colon cancer and died in 1992. While she was dying, her husband was taking her prescribed pain medication for himself. By the day she died, he had already killed 3 women. Saint Augustine, Florida, is the oldest continuously occupied European settlement in the United States. Founded by Spanish colonizers in 1565, it sits on the northeastern Florida coast, about 60 miles south of Jacksonville. Its downtown is a carefully maintained historical district. Stone forts, horse-drawn carriages, cobblestone streets, bed and breakfasts. Every year, millions of tourists pass through it and see exactly what is presented to them. West of the postcard was Lincolnville. Lincolnville was a historically black neighborhood on the far side of downtown, not on the tourist map, not in the brochures. It had bars, motels, rooming houses, and a specific intersection that locals had named Crackhead Corner, West King Street at Volusia. This was Saint Augustine's street economy: drugs, sex work, cash, no paper trail, no appointments, no records. William Darrell Lindsey was a known figure in that world. He had 2 names there. Some called him Red Bird, a name that tied him to the drug and street economy of the neighborhood. Others called him Crazy Bill, not as a joke, as a warning passed woman to woman in doorways and at corners, through the informal communication channels of people who have no institutional ones available to them. Nobody translated that warning into a police report. Not for 13 years. He drove a pickup truck, he had cash, he was predictable, and he was selecting his targets with the operational precision of someone who understood exactly where the gaps in protection were. Lisa Fowley, 24 years old. October 9th, 1983. The Trade Wines Bar, Charlotte Street, downtown Saint Augustine. A Friday night in early October. Lisa Fowley, 24 years old, left the bar with William Lindsey. They drove to St. Augustine Beach. His statement, given to detectives 14 years after the fact. "We had sex and she wanted $300. I told her 50. That's all you're getting. She got loud. I strangled her. I drove the body out to Pachetti Road and dropped her in a water-filled pit. Her body was found 5 days later in a marshy area west of Pope Road. The investigation opened, produced nothing, and went cold. She was the first confirmed victim. She was also the one nobody had asked Lindsey about. He identified her photograph himself, unprompted, in that January 1997 interrogation room. He had carried that knowledge undetected for 14 years and felt no pressure whatsoever to disclose it. He chose to give her up on his own terms, which raises the question, one that was never fully answered, of what else he chose to keep. The years between 1983 to 1988, 5 years separate the confirmed killing of Lisa Fowley from the next documented murder. Investigators from Florida, Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina believed this gap was not silence. It was geography. Lindsey traveled, worked in different states, lived in different places at different points. Detectives who worked the case estimated his total victim count somewhere between 7 and 25. The range reflects what could be proven, not what likely occurred. 8 were confirmed. The rest remain in open files across multiple jurisdictions, in multiple states, permanently unresolved. Anita McQuaig Stevens, 27 years old, November 29, 1988, corner of Riberia and King Street, Lincolnville. 7 in the evening. Anita Stevens got into Lindsey's vehicle. The following morning, a utility worker found her body floating in a water-filled pit near Saint Augustine Beach. The medical examiner documented a shattered eye socket, a jaw fractured in 2 places, cigarette burns across her body, and bite marks. His statement: "I hit her with a piece of board about 3 feet long, several times across the upper body. Then I carried her to the pond and dropped her in. Then I drove home to my mother's house on Sylvan Drive." He drove home, he slept. He went about the following day as if nothing had happened, because for him, nothing had. Constance Marie, Connie Terrell, 26 years old, June 10, 1989. Connie Terrell knew Anita McQuaig Stevens. They were friends. They worked the same streets, shared the same corners, moved in the same world. 8 months after Anita was killed, Connie was dead too. Before Lindsey drove to West King Street on the evening of June 10th, he prepared. He brought 2 items from his home, a rope tied into a noose and a loaded .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle. He left his house with a noose and a rifle. The destination was already decided. He strangled her with the rope. She did not die. He shot her in the head with the rifle. He left her body semi-submerged in a water pit near Holmes Boulevard. A fisherman found her less than 12 hours later. She was 26 years old. She was the best friend of a woman he had killed 8 months before. LaShawna Streeter, 27 years old, March 1st, 1992, Sunday afternoon, 4:15, Crackhead Corner. LaShawna Streeter got into Lindsey's car. At some point during the drive, she tried to get out. She opened the door while the vehicle was in motion. He struck her. He stopped the car. He beat her with his fists until she stopped moving. Her body was found 10 days later on 4 Mile Road, hidden under branches on a dirt road, partially unclothed. She had been there for the entire 10 days. Whatever search existed did not reach her for 10 days. Donatha Sneed Haley, 32 years old, April 1993. Lindsey spent the day with Donatha at his trailer. They had known each other. The encounter was not anonymous. On the drive back, she told him she was HIV positive. His response, in his own words, "I started planning the murder. When we reached the end of the paved road, I stopped the truck and just started hitting her. I punched her 6 or 7 times. She went unconscious. I carried her to the bank and dropped her in the creek." Her body was never found. It has not been found to this day. Her family has no grave. They have no remains. They have a courtroom guilty plea, and after that, a permanent void where any form of physical closure should be. Cheryl Lucas, 32 years old, mid-June 1995. 2 in the morning. Rain. Cheryl Lucas flagged down Lindsey's vehicle at the corner of Palmer and King Street. They had not traveled one full city block when she grabbed money from his dashboard and jumped out of the moving car. She ran toward the railroad tracks, toward Crackhead Corner, away from him. He got out. He ran after her through the rain. He caught her. He crushed her skull with a tire iron. Her body was found days later at a boat landing on Moultrie Creek. She had tried to run. She almost made it. Diana Richardson, 48 years old. October 1995. He drove Diana Richardson to the same water-filled pit where he had killed Connie Terrell 6 years earlier. He knew the location. He had used it before, and he returned to it deliberately. During the encounter, something she did provoked him. He struck her once in the back of the head. He dragged her from the car and dropped her body into the water. The pit was approximately 30 feet deep. Her body has never been recovered. It is either still at the bottom of that pit or has been moved over time by water. It has not been found. She was 48 years old. Lucy Arnett Raymer, 32 years old, December 25, 1996. This is the killing that ended everything, and the one that contains the most human detail of any in this case. It was Christmas night, 1996. William Darrell Lindsey was living in a trailer at the entrance to the Taps RV Park on Tunnel Road in the Arden area of Asheville, North Carolina. A man named John Pearson was working as a taxi driver that night. He picked up Lucy Arnett Raymer and drove her toward the trailer park. During the drive, Lucy told Pearson exactly who she was going to see. She gave him the full name, William Darrell Lindsey. She explained she was staying with him because she was separated from her husband. When they arrived at the trailer, Lucy got out of the cab. She turned back to John Pearson, kissed him on the cheek, and wished him a Merry Christmas. Then she walked through the trailer door. Pearson drove away. He was the last person to see Lucy Raymer alive. Lindsey beat her to death inside the trailer. Several days later, a man named Jack Shelton was walking his dog Bowser along a concrete drainage culvert near a local creek. The dog stopped. Shelton looked down. He found Lucy Raymer's body. In her pocket was an unfilled paycheck from Wendy's, with her name printed on it. That paycheck identified her. When John Pearson saw Lucy's name and photograph in the local newspaper, he called the police immediately. He gave them the name she had told him in the cab, William Darrell Lindsey. Officers went to the trailer on December 29, 1996. Lindsey opened the door himself. His clothes were wrinkled. His hair was unwashed. He was arrested on the spot. A taxi driver's memory of a cheek kiss, a dog that stopped walking, a paycheck in a pocket, 3 small accidents of the ordinary world, and 13 years of killing finally stopped. A newspaper clipping in a Christmas card. Fred Thompson was a former deputy with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. Around the same Christmas that Lucy Raymer was being killed in North Carolina, Thompson sent a holiday card to former Sheriff Neil Perry. Inside the card was a newspaper clipping from North Carolina, a brief item about the arrest of a 61-year-old man in Asheville on suspicion of murder. It was a small gesture, the kind nobody expects much from. Sheriff Perry looked at the clipping and felt something connect. The St. Johns County Sheriff's Office had quietly maintained open files on a series of deaths for years. Women found in water pits, on dirt roads, near creek banks in and around the Lincolnville area. The cases shared a geography and a victim profile, but had never been formally linked. No suspect had ever emerged. The investigations had not generated sustained public pressure because the victims did not belong to the demographic that generates sustained public pressure. But those files existed. Someone had kept working. In January 1997, a cold case task force received Thompson's clipping and began making calls to North Carolina. 10 months of cross-agency coordination followed, extradition proceedings, intelligence sharing between multiple jurisdictions, and the careful preparation of a multi-state interrogation. On January 13, 1997, detectives from Florida, Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina sat down with William Darrell Lindsey simultaneously. They came with files covering as many as 9 unsolved homicides across the region. They expected a difficult fight. They did not get one. The interrogation, Lindsey gave written statements from the start. He provided forensic-level detail that only the killer could possess: specific disposal locations, specific weapons, the exact sequence of events, verbatim exchanges with his victims in their final moments. At one point, without any prompt, he looked at a photograph of Lisa Fowley, the 1983 victim, a case nobody at the table had mentioned, and identified her himself. He pointed at her face. He said, "That one too. 14 years of cold case resolved in a single unprompted sentence." Criminal psychologists who later reviewed the interrogation noted that his behavior was not consistent with guilt or remorse. It was consistent with control. Even surrounded by detectives from 4 states, he was managing what he gave them and what he held back. He was performing, not confessing. He chose to give them 8 women. The files from Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina, covering cases investigators believed he may have been responsible for, were never formally resolved. He may have chosen to keep those. The record cannot say otherwise. FBI criminologists classified William Darrell Lindsey as a disorganized lust killer, a specific behavioral category within the Bureau's typology of violent offenders. The term disorganized does not mean incompetent. It means reactive. The violence was driven primarily by impulse rather than ritual. Crime scenes reflected chaotic action rather than careful staging. There was no consistent signature investigators could use to link crimes across 13 years to a single perpetrator. His weapons were almost always improvised: a board, a tire iron, his fists. The exception, the night he left home with a rope and a rifle specifically for Connie Terrell, demonstrates that deliberate planning was within his capability when he chose to use it. But his default was explosion, not execution. Disposal methods followed no pattern either. Bodies dropped in open water, bodies barely covered under branches, bodies sunk in 30-foot pits, one left near a drainage culvert in a different state entirely. No consistent method for investigators to trace. Sexual psychology documented in interrogation records is clinically significant. Violence was not adjacent to his sexuality. It was the condition required for it. This explains why specific triggers, a demand for more money, a disclosure of illness, an attempt to escape, produced lethal responses rather than withdrawal. What made him operationally successful across 13 years was not intelligence. His IQ tested below average. It was not sophistication. His methods were crude, and his disposal was primitive. It was victim selection. He chose women who existed outside the systems designed to generate urgent institutional response. Women in addiction, women in the street economy, women whose disappearances would be investigated slowly or not at all. He understood, with the instinct of a practiced predator, where the protection ended, and for 13 years the protection ended exactly where he expected it to. In a television program called Evil Lives Here, an episode titled I Hate Being Daddy's Girl aired featuring an account from one of Lindsey's daughters, Robin Lindsey. She described growing up with him. What she offered aligned precisely with the criminal record, a man who presented one face to the outside world and a different reality at home, a father who could be warm in one moment and terrifying in the next, a man whose children lived inside a version of him that his neighbors never saw and his church never suspected. Robin Lindsey was one of the 5 children from his first marriage, one of the same children he loaded into a car and deliberately crashed in 1974. She grew up. She survived the childhood. She eventually sat in front of a camera and told the truth about her father on the public record. That required something significant. The record should acknowledge it. On May 21st, 1999, 2.5 years after his arrest, William Darrell Lindsey entered guilty pleas to 4 counts of second-degree murder. Anita McQuaig Stevens, Constance Terrell, LaShawna Streeter, and Cheryl Lucas. On July 8, 1999, he entered 2 additional guilty pleas. Donetha Sneed Haley and Diana Richardson, the 2 women whose bodies have never been recovered. The remaining charges related to Lisa Fowley and Lucy Arnett Raymer were resolved in separate proceedings. As part of the plea agreement, the death penalty was removed from the table. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His attorneys subsequently filed appeals arguing that elements of his sentencing constituted cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. The appeals were denied at every level. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear the case. Victim impact statements were delivered in court. For the families of Donetha Sneed Haley and Diana Richardson, the courtroom was the only available location for any resolution at all. There was no burial to plan, no grave to visit, a statement, a sentence, and after that, nothing physical to hold on to. 8 confirmed victims. That is the official number. It appears in court documents, in newspaper archives, in his Wikipedia entry. What the number does not capture, Donetha Sneed Haley worked at a job. She had a name she preferred. She told a man the medical truth about herself, and he killed her for it. She is still out there, in a creek somewhere, and her family has spent decades without knowing where. Diana Richardson was 48 years old, the oldest of his confirmed victims. Her body is at the bottom of a pit he had used before, or it has been moved by 30 years of water and time. It has not been found. Lucy Arnett Raymer worked at Wendy's. She carried an unfilled paycheck in her pocket on Christmas night. She kissed a stranger on the cheek because it was Christmas, and that was the kind of person she was. Cheryl Lucas ran. In the rain, at 2 a.m, she grabbed what she could and ran. She almost made it to the corner. LaShawna Streeter opened a car door at speed because she sensed something was wrong. Her instinct was correct. It wasn't enough. Connie Terrell was the best friend of the previous victim. The 2 women knew each other. They warned each other. The warning didn't reach far enough. Anita McQuaig Stevens was 27. After he dropped her in that pit, He drove home to his mother's house and slept. Lisa Fowley was 24. Her family spent 14 years not knowing. 14 years is a long time to not know what happened to someone you love. The city of Saint Augustine still carries 9 unsolved homicides from the same period on its books. Investigators never publicly excluded Lindsey from those cases. The estimated total victim count across 4 states ranges from 7 to 25. The confirmed number is 8. The distance between 8 and 25 represents an unknown quantity of families who never received even the partial resolution that these 8 families received. On April 17, 2001, William Darrell Lindsey died of cancer at Marion Correctional Institution in Lowell, Florida. He was 65 years old. He had served less than 2 years of a 30-year sentence. He died with medical staff present. His body was accounted for. His death was recorded and documented. He has a grave marker registered under his full legal name, William Darrell Armstrong Lindsey, at Find a Grave. Donetha Sneed Haley does not have a grave marker. Diana Richardson does not have a grave marker. Their families know the name of the man who killed them. They still don't know where he put them. In 2005, authors McKay Vernon and Marie Vernon published Deadly Lust, A Sex Killer Strikes Again and Again, the only full-length book about this case. It documented the investigative timeline, the social conditions that made 13 years of killing possible, and the lives of the women who were killed. It received less attention than it deserved. William Darrell Lindsey spent 13 years in plain sight. His neighbors found him pleasant. His children called him Dad. His church knew his face. The women on West King Street called him Crazy Bill and passed the warning between themselves in the only way available to them, quietly, directly, woman to woman. That warning never reached anyone with the authority to act on it until a retired deputy put a clipping in a card, a taxi driver remembered a kiss on the cheek, and a dog stopped walking at a drainage culvert. 3 accidents of the ordinary world. That is the margin by which it ended. The structural failure at the center of this story is not one detective's mistake or one missed lead. It is a system that for 13 years sorted victims by perceived social value and directed investigative urgency accordingly. Women in poverty, women in addiction, women in the street economy. Their disappearances were investigated with less speed, searched for less persistently, and mourned less loudly than others. William Darrell Lindsey did not design that system. He studied it, used it, and relied on it consistently for over a decade. In that interrogation room in January 1997, he offered the world a clean explanation for everything, good Bill and bad Bill, as if a man who beat women to death and drove home to sleep in his own bed was 2 separate people sharing a body. He was not 2 people. He was one man, shaped by one childhood, processed through one system that saw the warning signs repeatedly and released him back into the world repeatedly. The 7-page suicide letter, the sociopath diagnosis, the aggravated assault charge, the deliberate car crash with his children inside. Every institution that encountered those facts and did nothing carries a portion of what followed. Their names said in full one final time: Lisa Fowley, Anita McQuaig Stevens, Constance Marie Terrell, LaShawna Streeter, Donetha Sneed Haley, Cheryl Lucas, Diana Richardson, Lucy Arnett Raymer. This film is for them.